Welcome to the Lifestream at First Unitarian Wilmington podcast. Here we will share some sermons, talks, interviews, or conversations we call life journeys, and also occasionally music. I'm Reverend Larry Piers, minister at First Unitarian Church of Wilmington, Delaware. If you enjoy what we are offering, please share it with a friend. Our purpose is to spark conversations and to share what we value as a Unitarian Universalist congregation with a wider community. To find out more about us, please visit our website, firstuuwilm.org. And now, welcome to this episode of Lifestream at First Unitarian. This month, as you know, I have been inspired by these words of John Lewis. It seems he's actually sending a missive directly to us at a time when we most need to hear it. His words bear repeating, remembering, and reciting again and again. You know the words. Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful. Be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or a year. It is the struggle of a lifetime. Never, ever be afraid to make some noise. This is your part. Make some noise. And get in good trouble, he says, necessary trouble. Voices like his and a life like his remind us of the personal, collective, and spiritual struggle that we are in right now. It did not begin just a month ago. We are reminded that there are many who've gone before us who have not despaired, but became channels of hope, and that is our task as well. We can reach back and touch the head and the brow of those whose life and art were part of the struggle for the inherent worth and dignity of every person, for caring for the common good, for a democracy that invited more and more voices in and diverse experiences to be heard. Some of our Unitarian Universalist ancestors and those of other faith traditions and humanists would be in that procession that has proceeded to us in this moment. Now we have to navigate the time that we are in. Will what we offer the generations that follow and to the fragile earth that cries to us, will we offer enough to them and to this earth? We are not alone. There are many who've gone before us who have answered the call to make good trouble, even when the circumstances seemed insurmountable. We've inherited what they have done. Let's not take it for granted. In his memoir, Across the Bridge, A Vision for Change and the Future of America, John Lewis makes this strong declaration that we heard as our chalice lighting this morning. You are a light. You are the light. Never let any person or any force dampen, dim, or diminish your light. Study the path of others to make your way easier and more abundant. Study the path of others. I remember my elementary school days. It's amazing you can think back that far, isn't it? When I would leave the school library with books about ancient saints and modern-day doctors and inventors and social reformers tucked under my arms for good reasons, which I don't have to go into now, I longed for stories that I could put my hands on and wring out whatever molecules of faith, hope, and courage that I could find from their stories. To this day, I love biographies and memoirs of real people doing real things. I have drawn faith, strength, and courage from, as Lewis says, studying the path of others. And I have to tell you, sometimes, a number of times, those others include members in this congregation whose stories have conveyed wisdom and strength and faith to me as well. How many of you have had similar experiences with those here in our congregation? Maya Angelou's life and art demonstrates that she is a holy troublemaker. When we study her life, we discover someone who continued to rise despite what life and society brought her way. Rise and be prepared to move on and ever on is the continuing theme of Maya Angelou's life story, which she outlined in 7 volumes of her memoir. In her poem, Still I Rise, she's offering a testimony worth hearing in our time. I'll share some of the verses from that poem now as a way to sense and to receive from her spirit and her sense of troublemaking. Still I rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons and like suns with certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I rise. Can you sense the spirit of the person who wrote those words? Let's imbibe that just a little longer and recognize the gift that they are for us in this time. In the poem, she continues to declare that no matter what the circumstances have been, are, or could be, still she rises, still we can rise. Maya Angelou demonstrates one way of transmuting personal pain and collective trauma is through the power of words. Angelou believes that words are things, and she knows that her words have helped to change lives and to change society. Maya Angelou once said, "Words mean more than what is set down on paper. It takes the human voice to infuse them with deeper meaning." When you know some of the circumstances of her life, you can appreciate that she did not come across this particular wisdom about the power of words easily. As Angelou describes in her first of a 7-part memoir, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, she describes how as a 7-year-old child, she was abused and raped by her mother's boyfriend. When she told her brother what had happened, he told the rest of the family. The boyfriend was arrested and was found guilty and was jailed for a night and a day. 4 days after his release, he was murdered. It was at this point that Maya Angelou became mute for 6 years. She reflected later in her life that I stopped speaking because I thought my voice had killed him. My 7.5 years logic told me that my voice killed a man. And so it was better I did not speak. So I didn't speak. Her mother soon sent her and her brother back to live with their maternal grandmother in Stamps, Arkansas. It was there in Arkansas that her grandmother's love and faith surrounded her and provided a cocoon for her gradual healing and unfolding. Angelou tells this story. My grandmother would braid my hair and I'd sit on the floor, and Mama, what she called her grandmother, would sit on a chair and she would brush my hair and she would say, "Sister, Mama, don't care what people say about you. Must be a moron and you must be an idiot because you can't talk. Sister, Mama don't care. Mama knows that when you and the Lord get ready, you're going to be a teacher. Sister, you're going to teach all over this world." I would sit there and think, this poor, ignorant woman, didn't she know I would never speak? But we know the truth of that story and what unfolded. During those 6 years of not speaking, sure, that was Maya Angelou incubating the self that she would become. Perhaps each of us have occasionally had periods of incubation as well, a time of pause, a time of setting apart, a time of going within, a time of cultivating the qualities that will serve you in your own reemergence. Perhaps you are finding a need for periods of incubation now, where you can form yourself in the midst of a rapidly changing, disturbing circumstances of our time. How many of you feel that draw towards incubation? Yeah. Friends, I want to remind all of us that incubation is a purposeful, time-limited pause. A time for giving birth to what's next until we find our voice or our way of giving expression in hopeful action until we find that we too rise up. I just had the image of like setting a timer for your own incubation. And then when the timer goes off, it's time to get ready to rise up and to re-engage. During those years of not speaking, young Maya would escape into the world of literature, guided by a friend of the family who would also be able to obtain books for her at the segregated white school library. During these years of not speaking, Angelou nourished a remarkable memory and developed her skills as a keen observer and a deep listener. Angelou would later say, "When I decided to speak, I had a lot to say." And she did. Of course, you know, Maya Angelou eventually taught all over the country in this world, Israel, Rome, Africa, in a number of languages with an eloquence and, as she puts it, a sassiness that moved her audiences and nurtured their spirits. Later in life, she became a professor at Wake Forest University. Her first book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, gives an account of her life of coming of age in the South in the 1940s with its blatant and cruel racism, and then subsequently to live with her mother in San Francisco, California, where she became the first African American to work as a streetcar conductor. after several applications and a lot of persistence. Her mother, Vivian Baxter, urged her daughter on by saying, "Give it everything you got. Can't do is like don't care. Neither of them have a home here." She became a civil rights activist. She was influenced by Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. And in the verses from Still I Rise, she's clearly addressing the collective trauma that has impacted many African Americans in this country and impacted all of us in one way or another. Listen to these verses of Still I Rise. Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. Maya Angelou found her way through many personal traumas and the collective trauma of racism in her life, and she offers this perspective. The traumas of my life can't be undone, but I can heal and grow. And perhaps my stories can have an impact and help others who may be going through something similar. Anytime I witness someone go through a similar pain, like those that reached out to me, I reached out to them. Her poetry, in its depth of feeling, its sassiness, and eloquence, can be songs that are directly applied to our ailing and aspiring souls. Those who've studied her life have noticed there's a pattern in her teaching. One writer distilled the lessons she learned from her interviews with Maya Angelou in this way. Maybe these are lessons for us as well. Number one, speak with confidence and power. Number two, don't be afraid to be vulnerable and share your story. Number three, see hard times as opportunities for growth. 4, develop your courage. And 5, have hope for the future. The last thing Maya Angelou tweeted before she died in 2014 was, "Listen to yourself, and in that quietude, you might hear the voice of God." Maya Angelou had what could be called an unassuming faith, for when, as she once said in an interview, "I'm always amazed when people walk up and say, 'I'm a Christian.' I always think, already? Got it? Goodness gracious, lucky you. I'm working at it," which means that I try to be as kind and fair and generous and respectful and courteous to every human being. She didn't want to assume that just by proclaiming she was a Christian that she was one. She recognized that for anyone to call themselves Christian or Jewish or Buddhist or Muslim, and for that matter, Unitarian Universalist, meant that they were practicing at it with the hope that one day they would be able to approximate what it means to be of that faith. Angelou explored many different faiths, and she often felt most at home in Christianity that she learned in her own childhood, especially as captured in some of the words of the spirituals, which she would often spontaneously sing out in some of her talks. When Angelou was asked by Oprah what her definition of God is, Angelou replied, "If I could say what my definition of God was in one word, it would be all. There's no place where God is not. All roads lead to all. What happens when I die? I go back to all." She added, "I write poetry to get to all. Art is another way of prayer." So if I studied the life and the art of Maya Angelou, I've come to appreciate some of her embodied faith, expressed, yes, in her poems, but even more so in her living. She reminds us that faith is what any of us constructs out of the sinews of our own experience. Faith is a way of being in the world, not merely a way of thinking about the world. As a holy troublemaker, Maya Angelou can remind us that it's not the conditions of our life or the times that we are in that ultimately define us. It's how we choose to respond. So, I'm going to jump. What's that called when you cut to the chase? I'm going to cut to the chase. So, being a holy troublemaker means to not let the current conditions define what you do and who you are. Instead, rise up. Being a holy troublemaker means to find in one's voice, the cries of those who suffer and strive, and to amplify that voice through speaking out in protest or in art. Rise up. Being a holy troublemaker means to find ways through everyday kindness to demonstrate our essential connectedness to one another when forces want to divide or diminish us or others. Instead, we rise up. We create good trouble again and again, which leads us to singing our song, Good Trouble. Please join in when you feel ready.